His wife laughed while signing the divorce papers until the judge reads his net worth. "I'm going to destroy you in court, Caleb. Half of everything you've built will be mine." Those were the last words Lydia Armstrong whispered before winking at her divorce attorney and signing the papers with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. She had no idea the man across from her had already orchestrated the most brilliant financial chess move in divorce court history. What happened next will challenge everything you thought you knew about marriage, betrayal, and revenge. Viewers, have you ever trusted someone so completely that their betrayal felt like a punch to the gut? A person you'd give your last dollar to, who you'd defend to anyone, only to discover their entire affection was a calculated performance, and you were just a mark in their long con? This is a story for anyone who's learned that the most dangerous enemy isn't the one who shouts their hatred from across the room, but the one who whispers, "I love you," while plotting your destruction. If you believe in stories of justice and seeing the arrogant get exactly what they deserve, subscribe and hit the bell. You won't want to miss the shocking conclusion. The Denver skyline was a jagged silhouette of ambition against a bruised purple twilight, but Julian Vance saw none of it. His world had contracted to the cold glow of his laptop screen and the even colder echo in his ears. The quarterly reports for his latest venture, a sprawling mixed-use development that promised to reshape a city block, blurred before his eyes. At 42, Julian had built Vance Holdings from a single construction loan into a multi-state empire encompassing real estate, logistics, and private equity. He was respected, feared in some circles, and relentlessly driven. Yet, in the sterile quiet of the penthouse suite, he was just a man clinging to a routine that had suddenly become a grotesque lie. Every evening at 8 p.m., no matter the city or the deal, he called his wife. It was the anchor of his chaos. He loosened his tie, the silk feeling like a noose, and tapped her name. "Evelyn." She answered on the second ring, her voice a melody of warmth. "Julian." Perfect timing. "I just got in." Girl's night was exhausting. She gave a light, airy laugh. "How's the mountain air treating the mogul?" He forced a normalcy into his tone. "Thin and expensive." Meetings went long. The investors are circling the project like vultures, but interested vultures. "That's my brilliant husband," she cooed, the pride in her voice once his greatest fuel. "Just don't let them take too big a bite." "When are you coming home to me?" "Friday," he said, the word ash in his mouth. "Later than planned. These things drag." A perfect understanding sigh. "I miss you terribly, but build our future, darling. I'll be right here." They spoke for a few more minutes. Mundane, married details about a leaking faucet she'd had fixed, his flight number, her plans for the weekend. A script they perfected over 6 years of marriage. When the pleasantries were spent, they exchanged soft goodbyes. Julian set the phone down on the desk. He leaned back, eyes closed, trying to unhear what he had already heard hours ago. But the silence was worse. He reached for the phone again, his thumb hovering over the screen. A notification glowed. Voice memo. Auto-saved. Call with Evelyn. 8:02 p.m. His heart, a heavy drum in his chest, began to pound. A security feature he'd implemented after a contentious business partnership went south. All calls recorded, a digital witness. He had forgotten it was there. Until now. With a tremor he couldn't control, he tapped play. Evelyn's voice filled the room again, but the warmth was gone, stripped away to reveal something metallic and sharp. "Already filed the papers, Paul. My attorney says it's airtight. Tennessee is a marital property state. 50% of every brick, every stock, every dollar is mine." A man's voice, smooth as aged whiskey and just as intoxicatingly dangerous, replied. 6 years playing the devoted little wife. Almost feels like a real marriage, doesn't it? "Don't," Evelyn snapped, but there was a thrill in her voice. "The performance is almost over. I'll claim emotional abandonment, chronic neglect due to his work obsession. The judge will eat it up. He's barely present. It's perfect." Julian's blood turned to ice. "Paul, and he suspects nothing?" Paul asked. "Not a glimmer," Evelyn scoffed. "He's perpetually distracted, building his little empire. Thinks I'm his safe harbor. He's so smug about his privacy, he doesn't even realize I've never seen his full financial portfolio. All I know is the joint accounts, which he keeps lean, maybe $100,000 total. A decoy. But the valuation firms I've discreetly hired estimate his net worth at over $900 million. Paul's low whistle was a sound of pure avarice. "Half of that sets us up for life. No more pretending to enjoy charity galas and construction site tours. The only tour I want is of our private island," Evelyn purred. the venom returning. He's so careful, so controlling. Thinks he's protected. But divorce court is a great equalizer. We'll bleed him dry, then disappear. New names, new passports, a life where Julian Vance is just a bad memory and a very healthy bank transfer. The recording ended there. The silence that followed was absolute, deeper than any Julian had ever known. The panoramic view of the city now felt like he was looking into the abyss of his own life. 6 years, a courtship that felt like a fairy tale, a marriage he believed was his foundation. All of it, a meticulously staged production. Evelyn wasn't just unfaithful, she was a predator, and Paul was her partner. The initial wave of nausea and rage crested, then receded, leaving behind something colder and more durable, a glacial clarity. She thought she held all the cards. She thought the law, his trust, and his own predictable nature were her weapons. She had no idea he'd been vaccinated against this specific poison a long time ago that he didn't pack. He didn't rage. He opened his laptop, canceled the rest of his meetings with terse, plausible excuses, and booked the last red-eye to Nashville. Then he scrolled to a contact saved simply as Gerald. The phone rang twice. "Julian, it's nearly midnight. This better be a fire." "It's an inferno, Gerald," Julian said, his voice eerily calm. "I'll be at your office at 8 a.m. Clear your day. It's about Evelyn." A pause on the line. Gerald Monroe wasn't just his corporate attorney. He was the legal architect of Julian's empire, a man who thought in fortifications and loopholes. "Understood. I'll be waiting." The early morning light in Nashville was soft, but it did nothing to warm Julian as the Uber pulled up to Gerald's unassuming brick office. Inside, the air smelled of old leather and strong coffee. Gerald, silver-haired and sharp-eyed in a crisp suit, gestured him into a soundproofed conference room. Without preamble, Julian placed his phone on the polished table and played the recording. Gerald listened without expression, his fingers steepled. When the final, damning words faded, he let out a long, slow breath. "This isn't divorce, Julian. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. Interstate, given the planning. It's a federal offense." He leaned forward. "But the more immediate problem is her claim to your assets." "The trust," Julian stated, not asking that a ghost of a smile touched Gerald's lips. "The trust. You remember why we set it up?" A memory, vivid and painful, flashed before Julian's eyes. Not his own, but his father's. A proud, self-made man broken not by business, but by a divorce that had carved his life's work in two. Julian, at 25, had sat with his father in the shell of a house that was no longer his, listening to a lesson seared into his soul. "They don't care about the sweat, son. They only see the balance sheet. Protect what you build before you give someone the power to break it." "I remember," Julian said, his voice thick. "Good. Because every significant asset you acquired before Evelyn. Vance Holdings, the commercial real estate portfolio, the private equity stakes, was placed in the Vance Legacy Irrevocable Trust 2 years before you even met her. Under Tennessee law, assets placed in an irrevocable trust prior to marriage are not considered marital property. They are untouchable. And what's left?" Julian asked, though he knew. "What's left in your personal name is the chaff," Gerald said, opening a file. "The house on Bellwood Boulevard, which has a sizable mortgage. 2 cars, a checking account with approximately $87,000. A few personal investments. The total net worth in your personal capacity is roughly $1.2 million, most of which is equity in the marital home. That is what the court can divide." Julian almost laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Evelyn, in her greed, was chasing a phantom. She saw the skyscrapers, but didn't know they were built on land she could never claim. "So we let her file," Julian said. "We do more than that," Gerald corrected, his eyes glinting. "We need to know who Paul is. This has the stench of a professional operation." He picked up his phone. "Marcus? It's Gerald. I'm emailing you a name and a recording. I need a deep, quiet background by yesterday. Focus on connections to any known con artists or marital fraud rings." Hanging up, Gerald turned back to Julian. "Go home. Act normal. Give her nothing. The more confident she is, the more rope she gives us to hang her with." The colonial-style house on Bellwood was a picture of suburban elegance. Evelyn was at the door before he reached the steps, a vision in cream linen, her smile as bright and welcoming as always. She threw her arms around his neck. "You're early. This is the best surprise." He hugged her back, burying his face in her hair that smelled of her familiar, expensive perfume. The scent of betrayal. Missed you, he murmured, the lie smooth on his tongue. That night, over a dinner she'd fussed over just for him, the performance continued. She was luminous, attentive, hanging on his every word about the Denver project. He played his part, the tired but devoted husband, all while watching the actress deliver her final, unknowing soliloquy. 3 days later, the script reached its climax. After a tense, silent dinner, Evelyn produced a thick manila envelope from her desk, her expression a masterpiece of pained resolve. "Julian, we need to talk about us," she began, her voice trembling with manufactured sorrow. "We've grown apart. I feel so alone in this marriage." She slid the envelope toward him. "I want a divorce. A clean, fair one. I'm entitled to half of what we've built together. Just sign, and we can both move on with our dignity." He looked at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. "Half of everything. It's the law," she said, her eyes hardening just a fraction. "I've spoken to a lawyer. I know my rights. Don't make this ugly. Think of your reputation." Julian met her gaze, his own devoid of the anger she expected to provoke. He saw only cold calculation in her eyes, the gleam of the prize she thought was inches away. He pushed the envelope back, slowly. "No," he said quietly. "We'll see what a judge has to say about what's fair." Her mask slipped completely, revealing the snarling predator beneath. "You stubborn fool. Fine. I'll drag you through every court in this state. I'll take everything. I know you're hiding assets, Julian, and I will find them. You'll be left with nothing." He stood, his chair scraping softly on the floor. "We'll see," he repeated and walked out of the room. As he climbed the stairs, he heard the furious, hushed call. "Paul, you won't sign. We're going to Plan B court. Be ready." Upstairs, in his study, Julian looked out the window at the manicured lawn. The trap was set. She had taken the bait. Now he just had to wait for the jaws of the law, guided by Gerald and fed by Marcus's investigation, to snap shut. The Davidson County Courthouse hummed with a vicious energy. The gallery was packed, not just with the usual court watchers, but with business journalists, curious socialites from Julian and Evelyn's circle, and a palpable sense of schadenfreude. This was the divorce trial of the season, the petitioner's table. Evelyn Vance was a vision of wronged elegance. A tailored dove-gray Chanel suit, pearls, her blonde hair a perfect sweep. She wore an expression of dignified sorrow, occasionally dabbing a tissue at the corner of her eye. Beside her, her attorney, a slick litigator named Robert Mills, exuded confidence. In the first row of the gallery, a handsome, dark-haired man in an expensive but understated suit sat with a relaxed posture. To Evelyn, he was Paul, her lover and partner. To the court roster, he was Thomas Reed, a freelance business consultant. At the respondents' table, Julian sat with a stillness that contrasted with the room's buzz. His charcoal suit was impeccable, his face an unreadable mask. Next to him, Gerald Monroe arranged a series of plain black binders with methodical calm. Judge Armand Fletcher, known for his no-nonsense demeanor and impatience with theatrics, took the bench. This court is now in session. Counsel, let's proceed without the melodrama. Mr. Mills, you may begin your opening statement. Mills rose, oozing sympathy for his client. Your Honor, today is a sad day. It's the day a dedicated wife must publicly recount how her husband's obsession with wealth left their marriage an empty shell. For 6 years, Evelyn Vance was the heart of the home, the supportive partner, while Mr. Vance was absent, building his empire. Under Tennessee law, that empire is marital property. We are here today to ensure Evelyn receives her rightful 50% share, which our financial experts estimate to be valued at no less than $450 million. She is not greedy. She is seeking what the law provides after years of emotional abandonment. He painted a poignant picture. The lonely wife in the big house, the missed anniversaries, the financial control where she was given an allowance from their meager joint accounts. When Mills finished, Judge Fletcher turned. Mr. Monroe, your response. Gerald stood, adjusting his glasses. Your Honor, my colleague tells a compelling story. Unfortunately, it is a work of fiction. The central premise, that Mr. Vance's business holdings are marital property, is demonstrably false. He opened the first binder. 2 years prior to even meeting Ms. Evelyn Harper, Mr. Vance established the Vance Legacy Irrevocable Trust. Into this trust, he placed the ownership of Vance Holdings, his commercial real estate portfolio, his private equity investments, and his intellectual property. These documents, notarized and time-stamped, are uncontestable. He handed a copy to the clerk, who passed it to the judge, and another set to a stunned Robert Mills. Under Tennessee Code annotated, Section 36-4-121, assets placed in an irrevocable trust prior to marriage are the separate property of the settler. They are not subject to division. The gallery erupted in whispers. Evelyn's composed face went slack with confusion, then flushed with dawning panic. She shot a frantic look toward Paul in the gallery. His relaxed posture had stiffened. "Your Honor," Mills spluttered, quickly scanning the documents. "This is a last-minute deception, a shell game to defraud my client. The documents are dated 7 and 8 years ago." "Counselor," Judge Fletcher said dryly, peering at the stamps. "They appear to be in order. Mr. Monroe, what, pray tell, is considered marital property in this union?" Gerald opened a second, much thinner binder. The marital estate consists of the primary residence on Bellwood Boulevard, which has an outstanding mortgage of $1.8 million, 2 automobiles, a personal checking and savings account totaling approximately $87,000, and a small, publicly traded stock portfolio. The total net value of all marital assets is approximately $1.3 million. Mrs. Vance is, of course, entitled to an equitable portion, which we calculate to be roughly $650,000, accounting for the debt. A sound escaped Evelyn, a sharp, choked gasp that she transformed into a sob. "That's a lie," she cried out, standing. "He's worth nearly $1 billion. He's hiding it. He's a liar." "Ms. Vance, you will control yourself," Judge Fletcher warned, his gavel poised. "You are represented by counsel." "But, Your Honor," he sit down. She collapsed in her chair, trembling, her beautiful facade shattered into pieces of raw, furious terror. The prize she had plotted for, performed for, sacrificed 6 years for, had just evaporated. She wasn't getting half of $1 billion. She was getting half of a mortgage. Gerald wasn't finished. "Your Honor, while the civil matter of asset division appears clear, this court should be aware that there are significant criminal implications to this case that extend beyond its purview." "Explain," the judge commanded. "We have provided evidence to the Federal Bureau of Investigation," Gerald said, his voice dropping, making the gallery lean in. "Evidence that suggests Ms. Vance's petition is not based on marital discord, but is part of a deliberate, criminal conspiracy to defraud Mr. Vance through marriage fraud and interstate wire fraud." Before Mills could even object, the double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. 2 men in dark suits entered, their presence causing an instant hush. They walked with purpose down the center aisle, past Evelyn's table, and stopped directly in front of Thomas Reed in the front row. Thomas Reed, also known as Paul Delaney, also known as Thomas Walsh, the lead agent said, his voice carrying. "FBI, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, interstate transportation of stolen property, and marriage fraud." He recited the Miranda rights as his partner deftly handcuffed the now struggling man. The gallery was in an uproar. Cameras flashed. Evelyn stared, her jaw unhinged, as the reality of her situation imploded. The agent then turned to the petitioner's table. "Evelyn Harper Vance, you are also under arrest for the same charges. You have the right to remain silent." "No," she shrieked, scrambling back as the agent approached. "You can't. I'm his wife. I deserve that money. It's mine." She became a wild thing, knocking over a water glass, her pearls scattering across the floor as the agent secured her wrists. The dignified society wife was gone, replaced by a cornered, shrieking animal being led from the courtroom. Her eyes, wide with hatred and terror, locked on Julian for a final second before the doors closed behind her. Judge Fletcher banged his gavel until order was restored, his face grim. "It appears the property division before this court is the least of these individuals' concerns. Given the evidence and the intervening federal action, I rule that the marital estate is to be divided as outlined by Respondent's Counsel. The petition for unequal division is denied. Court is adjourned." The gavel fell. It was over. 2 months later, in a stark federal courtroom, the final act played out. Julian sat in the witness section, a silent observer. Evelyn and Thomas Reed, now looking hollow and worn in drab prison khaki, stood before Judge Samuel Harwood. The evidence presented by the U.S. Attorney was devastating. Marcus's investigation had uncovered everything. Reed was a career con artist with 3 prior aliases and a trail of financially ruined men in other states. Evelyn hadn't been his first bride. She had been his most ambitious recruit. Their emails, financial records, and the testimony of a previous, broken victim from Florida painted a picture of cold, calculated predation, Evelyn's plea for mercy, claiming she was manipulated by a master manipulator, fell on deaf ears. The judge cited the recorded phone call from Denver. "You are not a puppet, Ms. Vance. You were a willing, eager architect. You spoke of bleeding him dry in your private island with chilling clarity." He sentenced Thomas Reed to 28 years in federal prison. Then he turned to Evelyn. "You weaponized the institution of marriage, a court of law, and your husband's trust. Your greed was not a crime of passion, but of meticulous, soulless business. The court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison." The marshals led them away. Reed was silent, a defeated shark. Evelyn was sobbing hysterically, the final, pathetic unraveling of the grand performance. Outside the courthouse, the Nashville sun was bright. Gerald clasped Julian's shoulder. "It's finished." Julian took a deep breath, the first one that felt truly clean in months. He thought of his father's broken spirit and the lesson that had saved him. He hadn't just protected his wealth. He had protected himself from becoming a ghost in his own life. He walked away from the steps of justice, not with a smile of vengeance, but with the quiet peace of a man who had looked into the abyss of betrayal and had not blinked. The empire was secure. The predators were caged. And the future, for the first time in a long time, was entirely his OWN.SO. Family, what did you think? Was Julian's strategy brilliant, or was it too cold? Could Evelyn ever deserve a second chance? Let's have a powerful discussion in the comments below. If you're on the edge of your seat, do us a huge favor. Hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell. We bring you these true-to-life dramas every single week. Thank you for watching.